So we're going to do a segment, and we're going to kick it off this week, and it's going to be about fantasy football, and probably for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it's going to be more about some draft tips and guys to look at. And then as we go into the season, it will probably be more about, duds, studs, all that kind of good stuff. So, Scott, this is your baby for this segment. Why don't you tell us what you're thinking about for fantasy football as people get geared up for their drafts?
Okay, thanks. And yeah, that offer for our league stands if you want to join.
Great, thank you.
Basically on.
I want that invite too.
Only if your track record is as good as Anthony's.
Oh yeah. Well, no, mine's a little better probably, but I mean it's terrible. Invite me.
So on fantasy football, we have probably a few weeks until most people are drafting. So I thought each week we'd probably look at a different segment, just hit a few key points. This week I was going to look at running backs. And one of the big things you may have noticed if you played fantasy football last year is just the total lack of high-scoring running backs. The bell cows, if you've been in fantasy for 5-10 years, you had many years where you had the Priest Holmes, LaDainian Tomlinson, Sean Alexander, these guys you could count on that were always drafted in top half. They were getting you 250, 300, 350 points, just dominating your league. And everyone was taking running backs, and the guy who didn't take a running back in the first round kind of got laughed at, and that was kind of the big thing was, you're taking running backs. Fast forward to 2015, for the first time ever, by my counting, there were no running backs who even topped the 250-point mark, and for like a non-point per reception on PPR. Very low across the board. The number of running backs who topped 200 points, anywhere near there was just hugely dropped. And there's several reasons for that. One, there were injuries. Guys like Jamal Charles got hurt. Guys like Le'Veon Bell got hurt. In addition to that, you also have a lot of teams going more of the tandem. The Bengals being a perfect example of that. They, with Hill and Bernard, they like to use two backs, and even if one's hot or cold, they tend to feed both. And there's a lot of teams going that direction, trying to keep the players healthy. So because of that, you now have this very unique situation in 2016 where you see a lot of wide receivers going early. And so you see a lot of, because there's just not that number of running backs out there that are the the guys you can count on. Right. There's no Marshall Faulk, no Green James, or you just don't have that guy. So because there seem to be a few people who are getting reached a bit too high, so I just wanted to highlight them and why they might be going a bit too high in some of the leagues. First one to mention was Lamar Miller. He never really had a great season. He's going to Houston, which had a horrible run game last year. Arian Foster, he was hurt, but just had struggled. His backups didn't do much. He's gone there. They have a horrible quarterback. I know last week we talked about someone thinking that Dalton was no better than Osweiler. I will disagree with that. I just don't see Houston's offense churning out a running back worthy of a top 10, top 12 pick where Lamar Miller seems to be going. He's being drafted up there because he's supposed to be a 3-down back, be a bell cow, but you can still have a lot of carries and not get the yardage. So he's one I think's being reached for. Another one is Devonta Freeman, the running back from Atlanta. If you remember this time last year, Tevin Coleman was the starter, and it was only when he got hurt that Freeman went in. And early in the year, Freeman had a few really big games. I think his first 5 or 6 weeks, he was phenomenal. If you had him after that, he was a total dud. And going into camp this year, Coleman's healthy, and the Falcons coaches even said they expect to do a split of some sort. It could be 50-50, it could be hot hand, cold hand. So I think a lot of people are reaching for him in round 1, early round 2, expecting him to have last year. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen when the team even says he's only going to get about half the touches. And assuming he's a starter, he's no guarantee to stay the starter. And the other one is David Johnson. I've seen him go as high as 1, 2, 3 in a lot of drafts. One of the things I see with him is here's a guy who only had like 500 rush yards last year. And I know he had a ton of receiving yards. So a lot of that seemed to be on really big plays where he just kind of got loose. And if you look at the Cardinals last year, they just had one of those years for the ages. That's one of those years their fans will talk about for 10, 20 years. Palmer had a career year. They just, one of those years you're not going to have every year. They just had a lot of huge plays, just had a phenomenal season. And I think a lot of people look at what Johnson did and say, wow, he scored a lot of points, had a lot of touchdowns. Now you make him the starter for the whole year. But the problem is they have Andre Ellington coming back, and granted, he's not going to be much more than a third down back, but they brought Chris Johnson back. And word out of Arizona is that David Johnson isn't going to be the bell cow everyone expects him to be. He'll probably get workload a little more than last year, so he's probably going to be worth, he'll probably be a top 10, top 15 running back when it's all said and done. But I just don't see him being, the guy, the number one or number two. And I could be totally wrong on that. I just don't get that feel from their camp that he's going to, produce, 1,000 receiving yards and 15, 16 total touchdowns unless he just has a second career year. And then one last one running back I'm just going to end up on is one everyone's missing out on is Arian Foster. A lot of people have kind of written him off because he's always hurt. Had a horrible year last year and a horrible offense. He went to Miami. And I've seen a lot of people drafting AJ higher than him, which doesn't make a lot of sense because the coaches are basically saying Foster's our starter. He's our guy. He's our 3-down back. He tends to be going around the 40th or 30th running back overall taken. And you look at what Miami's saying, and they want to throw the ball too. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be one heck of a deal. So anyway, that's it for running backs. That's it for fantasy football. And if you disagree with me violently, feel free. Well, not violently, but if you disagree with me vehemently, feel free to make a post in the comments and tell me why I'm crazy or tell me why you might agree.